Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. On today's episode, I am joined by Steve Sherk of Sherk's Guide Service. Steve is a guide on public land in the mountains of Pennsylvania and spends more time in the woods than just about anyone. We discuss Steve's trail camera data from the 2022 deer season compared to both myself and my dad's cameras. So it totals about 250 plus cameras in the big woods. So this should be a good one. Steve has been a friend of mine over the years, and I really enjoy his stuff and learning from him as he hunts similar type terrain and woods. So excited about that. On this week's Mountain Buck Monday story of the week, we have a story coming out of Virginia from Jonathan Neese. Jonathan wrote in, Sawyer Neese and I, his dad, hunted this cold front on November 13, 2022. It's muzzleloader season here in Southwest Virginia, and we had a young 4-point buck walk out in the field. We watched him freshen up a couple of scrapes on the edge of the field. After about 30 minutes, we spotted some horns cresting over the hill. It was a monster to us. That buck went to the scrapes behind the 4-point and made his mark. Sawyer, who is 9, was behind the gun prone using my backpack as a rest. I pulled the hammer back and told him it's yours if you want it. I was watching the deer through my binoculars and boom, the gun went off. The deer took off running and the sound sounded like he may have missed and hit a tree. We walked to where the deer was and there was no hair or blood. Sawyer and I just started doubting as we walked and weren't finding any sign of blood. I saw like where a crash in the leaves may have happened, and just beyond that I could see horns and a white belly. I told him let's walk up this way, and he saw it lying there. He turned to me and jumped into my arms and just started weeping with excitement and relief. He ran to the deer and could barely talk. The biggest buck to date for him here in Southwest Virginia. I love that story. It's awesome seeing kids get involved in it and the stories that come in with them. I urge everybody to go over and check it out on East Meets West Hunt on Instagram and East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook. Be able to check out the photos from Sawyer's beautiful buck with his dad, Jonathan. So congratulations, guys, and thanks for sharing that story. And the only news I have this week before we jump into this episode is Timber Ninja's pre-order goes live February 24th with a Q&A for email subscribers on the night of the 23rd. Sign up for their email list at timberninjaoutdoors.com for the exclusive discount and information. So check that out. And other than that, I hope everyone's taking advantage of some good weather and getting out in the woods a little bit, doing some scouting. I'll be out of town. I won't be back in PA until March 1st. And then once I'm back, I'm going to be hitting the woods pretty hard and trying to get down to West Virginia as well to do some scouting, get some things set up. I've been e-scouting like crazy on the Spartan Forge web map, looking down at a lot in West Virginia because I'm really trying to figure that out. So I've been spending a lot of time there. And not everybody has this yet, but you wait until you get to see the Spartan Forge's web map once it's finished with all of the extra features to it that's basically taking a lot of the features from the phone and more and applying it to the web map. So I've been testing that for the last 4 months. Excited for that to go out live to everybody else. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. All right, Steve Sherk, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Hey, it's been a while, but I'm definitely excited. It's one of my favorite podcasts, so it's always an honor when you choose me to be your guest.
Yeah, man, you're welcome on anytime. But I did look back and I realized it was in 2022. I don't think you were on at all. The years prior, you were on multiple times throughout. So I apologize to the listener base that I didn't have you on this past year. But it's good to get to catch up. You and I stay in contact pretty often, so it's good to catch up.
Amen. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great talk.
So are you we were just talking before we started recording, typically in the wintertime you're doing you're snow plowing, and we've had a pretty mild winter so far in Pennsylvania. And I know it's not that way out west, but at least over here it's like we've had a pretty great winter. And yeah, so what's that been like for you?
Oh, it's been pretty nice. And, in my business, I have several employees and we do a lot of commercial work. So it's been a very low stress winter, which is nice because it's a very stressful job. I don't think if you've never done snow removal, especially commercially, because there's a lot of responsibility and you're constantly on call. So the low stress amount of stress has really been nice on me. And then obviously getting some extra time in the woods. You can't, I, really can't ask for much more than having a mild winter because, like I told you, most of our best or our biggest clients, pay so much for the whole season. So it's been kind of my advantage in a lot of ways, and I'm just keeping my fingers crossed it stays like this.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I was telling you before, my dad and I were talking about it, and we're like, man, like for anyone that does snow removal, this is definitely one of those years. If you do have contracts like that's a positive thing to have, because I do know. So
Yeah.
I have not been on your side as far as the one doing the snow removal, but I've been on the commercial side of hiring people to do that and seeing, like, I'm calling, hey, we got a shift change at 6 a.m. and we got a bunch of snow, and trying to get things cleared off so people aren't slipping and falling and all of that stuff. And that's got to be crazy, especially on
Yeah.
those winter years where you're getting pounded by snow.
Yep. No, because it's one of those things you sign up for, and it's not like it's a Monday through Friday, or it can be a 24/7 holidays. It doesn't matter. So I've seen really tough years and busy years, and like I said, I'm just thanking the good Lord that He gave me a nice mild winter so far.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Steve, I wanted to, you and I have been talking back and forth about kind of the weirdness of last deer season, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to just kind of get on here and talk a little bit about the 2022 deer season and some of the data that you've collected. I mean, you're running what, over 150 trail cameras now?
Yeah, we ran roughly 170 last year. That was the most we had out at once, but anywhere from 150 to 170.
Yeah, so that's crazy, and so I don't have nearly that much, but I'm running just over 50 now, and then my dad's got about 50, and I have all that data and notes here. So I was like, man, we got a lot of intel, and I'm curious to talk about some of the trends. But I kind of want to just start by just talking about how your deer season went in general before we kind of dive into some of those details. So if you want to kind of just talk a little bit about last year.
Yeah. Yeah, personally for me, it was a pretty slow start. And I'm not much of an early season hunter. It's not that I don't like it, but it's still a little bit busy landscaping and that time of year. So generally, I don't do a lot of early season, but I try to save my time for closer to the rut. And like I said, it was pretty slow. I passed up a few decent deer roughly like October. I think the one better day I had might have been like the 19th, and then had a couple good days late October, but usually that's when I connect, and that wasn't the case this past season. And then for me, early November was brutal. I know you were fortunate, but for me, it was extremely slow. And kind of a long story short, I ended up getting my PA buck on November 12th, which when we'll bring up the data, like it was a really, really good day to be in the woods up here. And I killed, that buck that day. And then, but in New York, I really didn't do that well. I did pass up 13 different bucks throughout gun season in New York. I only ever really had a couple encounters with mature deer over there. So just it was a 1 buck year for me. I only hunt 2 states anyways. But it was just a really weird year. There was a lot of highs. There was a lot of lows. There might have been more lows than highs this year. It just seemed like if you weren't out there in those key windows of the right time, and it just wasn't so typical as usual, or didn't have a good long stretch of good movement. I didn't think, but I was still fortunate for the deer that I got in PA, and I still had a very fun, and I still feel it was a very rewarding season, and just being able to be in the woods as much as I am able to do, especially with my job, like I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I didn't do a great job at the beginning of an intro, as I kind of assumed that everyone has heard you on here before, but just a quick background. So Steve does, so I'll just kind of roll with it here at first and you can add to it. But Steve has a landscaping company, so he's really busy all the spring, summer, and early into the fall there. But you also run a guiding service, Sherk's Guide Service, in northern Pennsylvania, hunting public ground, big woods stuff. And Steve spends more time in the woods than just about anybody that I know. And so to hear that you were having those struggles, I don't mean to say like that it feels good, because I don't mean that for you, but I think all of us were in that same boat. And I got lucky on November 4th, but that was the only deer that I had seen in like 5 days, like the one that I shot. So it was very rough.
Believe it.
It was, I mean, obviously, no matter what,
Yep.
like you can have, when it's the rut, you can have opportunities, but it was the worst deer movement that I had seen in a long time. And I spent a decent amount of time in the woods there from about October 25th through that November 4th time frame when I shot my deer. And it was painful. And even on some of the days that had decent weather, it was still not as great. Now there were some windows my camera told me I just wasn't in the right spots, but it was definitely just kind of an off year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was like, I mean, there was movement this year, and especially in the rut, but it was more confined movement. Like if you weren't in the actual ballpark, it's not like it was widespread where you could be in 6 different spots and kill a good buck in one day. It's like you had to be in just that one stand in that one location, and it wasn't like there was a consistent pattern. Like he might be here one day and not there for the next 6. So it was very confined, except for I would say roughly about November 12th to, I'll have it when we go through the data, but I'd say November 12th to like 21st is when I feel was the best time in the deer woods, at least in this part of the country, from what I was seeing.
Yeah, and let's dive into that detail, into that data, because I do have some things to add there, but I figure I'll wait until we kind of get into those timestamps. So talk about like your data, how you collect it, what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so what I do, and I've done it for 5 or 6 years now, I record daytime buck pictures from October 1st to December 10th. And that's basically because that's during Pennsylvania hunting seasons, whether it's archery or gun. And then I used to keep track of like moon phase, barometric pressure, wind, and all those things are a factor. But as I was doing it for a few years, what I was really noticing, at least in my area, just seemed like temperature had the biggest influence on these big movement days. So that's what I've really just been focusing on the past few years, is just temperature. So I write down the high and low temperature each day during the study, and then at the end of the season I gather all my camera cards, and it's not so much I'm counting like every buck photo that I get, but say if you have a buck working a scrape and you get 5 pictures of him, well, then I would only count that as one sequence, one buck picture per se. I've been doing it, like I said, for 5 or 6 years now. And it's really it's just amazing, surprisingly, because I never thought it was going to be like this, but it's always been a little different every year. Like some people will tell you that, man, November 3rd through the 9th every year you can count on it, and you can count on rutting activity, but it's like if you really want to hit it just right some years. It's just a crapshoot. You just never know. And to me, it's been mostly weather influenced than anything else.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it is difficult when you're starting to collect this data, especially with 170 cameras. It's very time consuming, and to be able to write down all of those other things as far as the barometric pressure and going through the moon phases and all of those different studies, like that's really difficult to be able to collect all of that stuff. So it's not a bad idea like you did, as far as like, all right, what's the biggest trend that's affecting movement, which sounds to be temperature and weather, and like let's focus on collecting the data on that and really be able to dive into it, which I think that's a good move. Like, up until really, the way I've been collecting my data has been more around specific deer, more so than like going through all of it in daylight movement. And like, I'll have, say there's like 4 or 5 bucks that I'll have across these areas. Like, I'll start logging data, and then like in my spreadsheet, I'll come up with a name for the buck, so I can like filter by him specifically, and almost like build a multi-year like pattern or somewhat of patterns on these deer, just because there's so much data to go through, to be able to, so that helped me kind of focus on it. And I put a bunch of details and notes in there as far as like, okay, weather, wind direction, other notes that might be like, okay, which way is he coming from, that type of stuff. And I'd put that in, but it was on a much smaller data set. Like, I didn't have as much to focus on, or as much to type up, I guess, or look up background data, because I was focusing on specific deer. But what I've found is like, it is so important on you just areas and times in general, like the way you're doing it. And it kind of made me think a little bit differently this year based on hearing what you're doing. And then my dad's done it the same way that you have, over the last few years. I think he has like 4 years of data on it. And I was like, there's a lot of really cool trends that you can see from it. Not really worrying about specific deer, but worrying about just the dates to be out there. And I know, like, for me, I love targeting specific deer, but I'll shoot other deer, and I believe you're the same way on that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially, I don't think some people that have hunted these kind of places really understand how difficult it is just to shoot a mature deer. So, it's nice to always get a big Pope and Young or something better than that. But any mature mountain buck, in my opinion, is a true trophy. And, I always, every year, and I know you do, like, I get really big deer on camera that I would love to shoot. But then again, like, I don't always have my heart set on a certain deer, knowing that the chances are few and far between. And to get an opportunity, or a couple, maybe a few a year, like, it's hard to pass up a mature deer, because it is such an accomplishment in the woods that we hunt.
Yeah, it truly is. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to start by looking at that how we're kind of analyzing that data, because I geek out on that stuff, and that's why I love like looking at your posts on Instagram and Facebook, and like how you dive into it, because it's just like I find, like, as I've interviewed hundreds of like successful hunters, like, everyone's got their thing, but most people are detail oriented in one way or another, and they pay attention to those things. And I think data is so critical. I was just talking to my dad the other day too, and I want to talk to him about it, but I haven't yet. As far as, I didn't realize he's been tracking moon phases, and he's got his own theories on that. Like, and I'm like, I've never paid attention to the moon, to be honest. Like, that's never been something that I've really thought about too much, because I feel like I have so much data I'm looking at already. I don't want to confuse it anymore, but I'm always interested when people do have data, and like what they're finding with those trends.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, moon definitely does influence movement. And I could be wrong. It might have more of an influence than what I even think. But after the first few years, it was like, why am I jotting down every single thing when I saw such a trend with weather and temperature? So I think it's great that, your dad is doing exactly, what I'm doing, and you're getting involved. And it's actually turned me to kind of a different approach. Like I drew the line coming into this next season, even though it's so far away. But I said, you know what? I'm actually going to hunt less because luckily I'm pretty flexible with my job and everything. I'm going to focus more just on hunting prime weather conditions because when I look back over the years, most of the deer I take have always been on those prime weather days. So it's not that I don't want to hunt, but I think you can pressure areas a little less and your chances of opportunity are so much greater on these prime days where I just feel like you kind of just take stabs on the right weather events and the right conditions. And I really think overall your success is better that way rather than just pounding areas day after day. And in life in general, when you have a family and I have a son in sports and that, it's like I really don't need to be probably hunting as much as what I used to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So your camera study, did you start basically like from the first day of deer season through November? How did you break that down?
Yeah, I'll grab some of my paperwork here. So I always do like October 1st to December 10th. And there is that break period when archery ends, like, I don't know, what is it, 10 days or something from then, 10 or 2 weeks, whatever, between the end of our archery to our gun season. I still collect data during that time because it's still a really good time to collect data, in my opinion. But so it goes, like I said, from the October 1st to December 10th. I'm really only interested in what's going on in hunting season. I've kind of dabbled a little bit in other times a year, and it's funny, like in the summertime, you get way more daytime movement than generally what you'll get early to mid-October. And it's like just certain times a year, deer act a lot differently, especially mature deer. But overall, yeah, I'm just most focused on that time frame because I want to collect data that's definitely going to help me in hunting season. Summer data, I don't think can really have a big impact or even spring compared to what you're gathering in the fall.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wish we could hunt in September because I feel like there's a lot
Yeah.
of big deer that move in daylight still in that middle, even like a week before our season opens. It's like, and then like the switch
Yeah.
changes. And I don't know if that has to do with, pressure sometimes of people going in and hanging their stands or food related. But man, there's
hmm
some really good opportunities I feel like in that middle of September.
Yeah. And even this past fall, the last week of October, because I was kind of collecting data then just because I knew that I was going to start in a week anyways. But last week of October, this past fall or September, was phenomenal for mature buck movement. Like I don't think I've ever seen that much mature buck movement. And then it kind of gets you excited because you're like, oh, here we go. Like first day of archery, it's going to be on. Not talking like rut, but just like really good movement. And definitely didn't happen. Literally to like September 30th, I had great movement, and then it died right off after that. So it's like you got to be kidding me. It's almost as if they knew that, just amazing. And that's probably a topic for another time. But I really don't know if it's one reason or a lot of different reasons. But every year I tend to see little movement like the first 10 to 15 days of October, and then it starts to trickle, greater and greater as the days go on.
Yeah, no, most definitely, and I'm sure too. Like, I know for me, most of the time my trail cameras are set up like kind of based off of that middle to end of October time frame, more so than like focused on maybe what it should be for early season because it's like that's when I plan on hunting the most. That's when I'm gonna, I want that data rather than trying to go shuffle cameras around, in the middle of October to change it for the next stage. Like a lot of times I'll just from a time standpoint, I'll set them up based off of the time of year that I plan on spending in the woods the most.
Yep, that's exactly the situation that I'm in. Like, I don't get a lot of buck activity on camera for the most part early October, but really my cameras aren't around a lot of buck bedding because I'm just focused on some hunting for myself, but the majority is for my business, and we're hunting in the rut. So I want to have everything deployed and to where it's going to be more beneficial in these rut areas versus, early season type stuff. But still, I would argue with anyone that there is just as good a movement early October as there is in late October, November. I don't think it's anywhere near as good. There is those windows, the last hour, first hour. Like I think you have movement, but not as much of a long range daytime movement till you get more into the rut.
Yeah. So let's start in October and kind of what your data had shown as far as the dates there and how that correlated with weather.
Yeah. And I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but this year I also recorded mature buck movement because I started to think about it more and more. I used to think it would be too difficult, but after I did it this past season, it wasn't really too bad. Like most of the deer, probably 70% of the pictures I got, like I felt confident in aging the deer. A lot of times if they were facing away or sometimes even facing towards me, I couldn't make good judgment, but I did see a major difference between mature buck data and then any buck data. The younger deer definitely move way more, than the mature deer. But would you want to go over more of the mature stuff than the overall buck, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, let's do the
Okay.
mature
Yeah.
deer and
So
focus on that.
yeah, and when I say mature deer, I tried to age 4.5 or older. Honestly, there's probably some 3.5s that just look 4.5. I'm not going to also say that I'm the greatest at aging deer. And then also we've had two bad, years of like no mass crops or anything. There's some older deer you'd be surprised that don't look as bulky as what they used to be. They almost look like 3-year-olds. So, but yeah, I'll kind of dive into what I got here. The best day I had in early October would be October 3rd. And that was out of 100 and we'd definitely say 170 cameras that time. We had 3 daytime mature buck pictures out of 170 cameras. But you look at the weather here, you look at the temperature, October 3rd, high of 50, low of 32. That was the best early season day that we had. And I can also tell you that, especially focusing on the mature buck activity this year, it was really amazing and brought to life as far as how much more mature deer are more focused on these weather patterns and, prime weather versus any other deer overall. So for early season, that was our best day. Other than that, we had a handful of pictures basically until October 19th. I only had 4 mature buck pictures on 170 cameras. So It's just, and I know it sounds just like mind-boggling how slow or how bad that is. But then right off the bat, we talked about how tough of a year it was. And it's just amazing how sluggish these mature deer were. I mean, it was just, they were so bogged down and so lethargic. It's just mind-boggling, and it can be frustrating too when you're out there hunting a deer that's hardly moving.
Yeah, and do you think food had anything to do with it this year as far as like acorn crop and beech? Like I know in my areas there wasn't really any acorns. There were some trees, but they dropped before the season even opened and they were kind of scooped up. There wasn't very many acorns. There was no beech nuts in any of the places that I hunted. Some black cherries, but most of that was gone by the end of September. What about for you? What did you see from a food standpoint?
Yeah, same exact thing. We actually haven't had acorns hardly in 2 years. I know the buck that I shot November, the one in November 12th there, and that's not that deep into the rut. It didn't have any fat on it. Way I look at is like, I actually watch a lot of those survivor shows, and it's amazing. Like after a while, when they haven't eaten, you can just see they're more lethargic, they're moving less. And if you think about it, yeah, I know that there's, probably plenty of browse and certain other kinds of foods in the woods, but like acorns and we don't have like, I'm sure where you're hunting too, we don't have much ag, or, you can't put out food plots. So when these deer are delayed going into winter to put on the right amount of fat, or maybe they never really got to ever put the right amount of fat on, I think their bodies are telling them, like, hey, you got to take it easy, because as much as you're supposed to be reproducing and taking part in the rut and being active, you're not going to survive the winter if you go too crazy. So I do think the nutrition standpoint of it really was a big factor. And at least up my way, you had 2 years in a row. We also had pretty bad drought conditions this past year. I think some areas there's too many deer, where there's probably, even if you have browse, there's not enough browse for the amount of deer in that area. So you throw all those factors in there, and you're just kind of, I should have realized you should be expecting to see, less movement going through the whole hunting season. That's basically what happened.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And from my data and my dad's, as I'm looking at it here, it was really slow. The 14th, there was a little bit, some daylight activity, and then after that, it really wasn't until the 19th, and the 20th was a hot day, from my cameras and my dad's. What about you as you start going into that stretch?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. That's about exactly when things started to turn on. In fact, we have a 3-day stretch here. October 19th, 20, and 21, we've got a total of 6 mature buck pictures. And I'm only talking mature deer. I could tell you overall we had a fair amount of buck pictures those days. And the big thing about it, like I said, was from October 3rd and to the 18th, we only have a handful of pictures in roughly a 3-week time period. And then bam, in a 3-day stretch, we see a flurry of movement. So, and once again, I credit that to weather, because we were roughly 50s and 60s, and we did have some mid to high 30-degree mornings, but when you look at the temperature, 19th, 20, and 21st, the 19th was 40 and 34. That's the high and low. 20th was 42 and 32. And then the 21st, we do have 60 and 28, but still it was that morning would be the 28-degree low on the 21st. Mm-hmm. It probably got 60 late in the day, and then after that, the movement shut down. So you could argue that temperature was a big factor in that stretch movement that we both saw.
Yeah, no, most definitely. That makes a whole lot of sense. And it's weird because in past years, I've seen a good jump around like the 13th through the 18th, and I didn't see that. I didn't see that this year. Actually, there was a cold front that came in. I don't remember the specific day, but sometime in that period, and I was like, "Here we go, this is it." And I went in and hunted, and it was no good, and neither were any of my cameras, which was kind of odd.
Yeah, I'll look up. I should have that real quick here, because I remember that, and I kind of got excited about that weather system too. I think it was looks like it was around like the 15th or so. And I'm looking here, and I have one mature buck picture the 15th. So it was almost like, sometimes everything lines up right, and you think, oh, going to hit a home run or whatever. And it's not, there's never a guarantee. I don't care what weather situation or where you're hunting, like, you're never going to have these animals completely figured out.
No, most definitely. And okay, so you'd said like from the 19th to the 21st, you had a good jump, which I had similar, data there. What about after that? What did it look like from there?
I had a decent stretch from the 27th to Halloween. In fact, the October 27th, we got 4 mature buck pictures that day. I also have 3 on the 28th, and then 4 on the 30th. I don't know why we didn't have anything the 29th. Sometimes that's just a fluke or whatever. And I actually have 2 on the 31st, but So you kind of look at it here, and you can look at October 25th, and we have a 73-degree high and a 51 degree low. But then after that, temps drop into the low 50s and low 30s for 4 or 5 days, roughly, and you see that spike in movement. So it's once again, I argue there that temperature was a big influence on that spike in movement because for me, it'd be interesting to see what you guys have, but it was we have some pretty bad data the first 7 to 10 days of November. I mean, very very unlikely activity for mature deer. We have some, but last year our best day was November 6th. And then this year, I mean, I actually don't even have one mature buck photo on November 6th. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. Okay. So I'll compare that. So the 27th of October was okay. A few photos across the board. 28th and 29th were actually the most in the entire season as far as big deer moving in daylight between me and my dad's cameras. And I had one camera on the 28th that had three different mature bucks on it in daylight in that spot. So maybe a doe came into heat in that area or something, but they were running around kind of at all times there. It was like, I think one picture was like 9:42 a.m. There was something around 11 and then something early in the afternoon, but it was just like that was a good day. And then even the 29th was very, very good there. Not as much the 30th and 31st, a few pictures, but it wasn't nearly as good as the 28th and 29th from our data. And then you go out further, first week in November, it was just like absolute dead on my cameras, like nothing good. And then my dad had a little spike on on November 3rd, which was hot, but he had some. It was hot temperature wise, but he had some movement on that day as well.
I'm back.
You're back. Oh man, that's funny. Yeah. So
yeah, that's what you get. That's what you get for living in the woods.
It's so anyone that's listening, the call went out and Steve just completely blacked off the screen, dropped off the call. I couldn't get a hold of him, and the internet went out at his house. And that's the same way. If my internet went out, I have no cell service at my house either, so it'd be like the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Well, now we're back.
We'll make it work though.
Yeah, we don't have the pretty bucks in the background now, but we got the roof of Steve's truck, so that'll do just fine.
All right. Yes. If the question where I left off, unless you have something different, but I lost out where you said you had maybe a prime day in early November.
Yeah, so November the 3rd, not on my cameras, but my dad has where 6 different cameras had daylight photos, but his isn't broken out into mature buck, so I don't know what that data exactly is. It's just buck data on November the 3rd. Now, I didn't have any of that on mine on that date. I had 0 pictures during that time frame, but yeah, so that, and then other than that, what's that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say I have only one mature buck on November 3rd, but I got 9 buck pictures on November 3rd overall, which were immature, but still that's not too bad. But it's just I'm amazed because like no one ever has done this with me before, and so like just to see the similarities is like crazy. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah. No, it is pretty cool. And then from there it wasn't really until November the 8th when things started to heat up again. And what does that look like from your standpoint?
November 8th was really, really good once again for younger deer. In fact, let me pull that up. Let's see here. So November 8th, we we had looks like I think if I count it looks like 20 pictures November 8th, which is pretty good. But I actually don't have a mature buck November 8th that
Okay.
I could 100% say was a mature deer. So 20 pictures, which I think is like a it's got to be in our top 5 or 7 days of the entire season for buck photos overall. So, and it was a really good temperature weather day. Like, I think I have that here. And even myself, I had a really good sit that day. Um, yeah. So we have, it looks like, I think it was like in the, I don't want to say for sure. That was just a note I made. But if I remember right, it was in, I think it was a high in the 50s and like 30 degrees for a low that morning.
Okay. Yeah, that was
So that
that
was,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was the day my cousin Mason shot his big deer. I'm looking back on my phone pictures actually, and November 8th is when he shot his deer. My
yep,
one of my uncles shot his deer November 8th. Um yeah, so yeah, that was
yep.
yeah, that was a pretty decent day it sounds like.
Yeah, no, everything lined up right. And that day for me, now I remember, I do know I saw a mature deer in the afternoon. I think I saw 3 or 4 bucks that morning. And then after that, it kind of died down for me again until the 12th. I don't know what you got, but that,
Yeah. Yeah, it was the 12th was so my dad didn't really have a great day on the 12th. He had a good day on the 10th. But he shot his
oh,
buck
okay.
on he shot his buck on the 12th. So but as far as camera data and for me mine was the same way where the 12th was where it started heating up again and then
Yep,
was pretty dang good throughout like the next 10 days.
yep, exactly. I can say that it was about 50% of our mature buck photos for the whole year. This is for us at least, were the 12th to the 21st. We also didn't go one day from the 12th to the 21st without getting multiple mature buck pictures. And the 12th and 13th, I have 15 pictures to combined, and overall for the whole season, I have 83. So in 2 days, you figure what's that, like over 10% or something like that in
Yeah.
just 2 days, maybe like 12% or something. So, and I can also say specifically on the 12th, so like at midnight, it was 60 degrees at midnight as soon as the clock struck 12, on November 12th. But then it got down in the 30s later in the day, so a big time cold front hit. And then after that, from like the 13th to the 21st, you're probably averaging highs at the most in the mid 30s, and most of the lows were in the 20s. So, I mean, it was just phenomenal weather for the rut. And I'm not saying that played the entire role into what we saw this past season, but it had a significant impact on that stretch of days being so good. Like the 12th to the 21st was the best stretch I had from my data.
Yeah, and yeah, no, and definitely. I mean, the 12th, I had the buck that I was hunting, even though I'd killed a different buck. He was daylight active. That was the first time that I had him in daylight all year since September, and he came in on the
Wow.
12th that evening. He came rolling through, and then he showed up again on the 14th, the 18th, the 20th, the 21st, and then the 25th, which I believe was the day before gun season. The 25th
Wow.
was a
Yep.
25th was a good day too in November for my cameras. That literally the day before
Yep.
gun season, and then he ended up getting killed that weekend. But it was just like there was a the 20th was a really good day across a bunch of cameras for me as well, and
Yep.
on my dad's cameras was not like his kind of slowed down after the 20th there, which I had some better action in one particular area the whole week leading up to gun season.
Yeah, and what I think was going on also is, and I don't know if you follow like on Facebook, or like Dr. Deer, Dr. James Kroll. You probably have at least heard of him before.
Yep, I've heard of him.
Um, but I know recently up in Michigan, they were testing fetuses, from does that were bred this past fall. And it was just like a shocking statement that they'd never seen before. But they they found that up in that area, most of the does were bred from like the 20th to even later than that in November. And I think there was some major flurries of hot does like the 20th to around our gun season. Maybe there's a few here and there even later than that, but there's even though that testing was in Michigan, I feel like we're northernly enough that I really think that was kind of similar to what we were seeing too in some of these spikes in rutting activity that late. I think there was a lot of does coming in heat late this year.
Yeah, and also I wanted to ask you, how does this compare to 2020? Because we had some similar rut conditions as far as weather goes in 2020. Did you see similar data
Yep.
then?
I should have brought 2020 with me, but on the top of my head, I know that in 2020 we had really good activity late October, which we kind of blew through that quickly. But I had my top 5 days, two of them were late October this year. I think for me it was like 27th and 28th. So that was pretty similar, except for me in it would be 2020. I didn't see as good a movement later in the rut as what I saw this year. But also, I always say this about 2020, like we didn't have cameras in the right areas, especially like 2020 was another drought year. We didn't have hardly anything down low. Didn't have a good well spread of cameras. That's why I learned from that year. And this year, even though it was still a tough year, I felt like we covered all bases, and that's why I think my data is a lot more accurate. But as
Okay.
far as 2020, it just seems like the late October period was very similar to what we had this year.
I agree. I saw the same thing in 2020, and even just from personally hunting and the activity that I had around like the 30th time frame was
Yep.
really hot. Yeah, and then there was like the 8th
Yep.
was good that year too. The 8th was good. The 14th is like a good date every year. It seems like it for me at least. It seems like the biggest of the big show up on the 14th, and I don't know why, but it just seems like that's a trend.
I'd say I see similar, data from that as well each year.
Yeah. And then in this December, last couple years, I've been leaving. Well, it's been like 4 years now. I've been leaving my cameras out through rifle season and just kind of hoping that they're still there. But
Yep.
I've been seeing some like rutting activity during gun season, like in that it's like the 5th through the 10th, like kind of in that time period there. I'm
Yep.
seeing there's one buck that shows up during gun season every year. I never get photos of him any other time, and he's pushing does around.
Yep. No, and this past season was our best year for photos in gun season that I've actually ever seen. I also think too, I think there was definitely some late rutting activity going on, but up our way, I don't know about your way, but we saw significantly less hunting pressure this year than even like last year. Although we had hardly any snow, I just feel like if there's not snow and guys go out 3-4 hours opening day, they're not seeing much, and I think they lose confidence, and just seemed like the pressure up our way was so down, and which really probably had a effect on those bucks not being quite as spooked and moving around more and chasing does throughout gun season. Which it's one of those things. I wasn't out there gun hunting. I had a few clients hunting them, but I wish I would have taken advantage of that. You look back at all this stuff and you're like, man, I should have done this, should have done that. And, it's too late, but you hope to use everything you're learning now for next season. And, hopefully it will help that way.
Yeah, definitely. Did you I didn't ask at the beginning, but do you have like a trend where you're setting your cameras? Like I know you said like you have some in the bottom, some in the tops, but like are you running them mostly on scrapes or what's kind of like the breakdown of how you're running your cameras?
Yeah, I will say, and that can affect the some of my study a little bit, is probably most of them are on scrapes. And half the reason they're on a scrape is you can always get really good photos on scrapes. That's as simple as that. Like, I don't want to say that you're going to get the best data or maybe the most consistent pictures on scrapes. Although a lot of my scrapes are just like travel corridors that there's a scrape like right on a deer trail that, deer just, it's just right in their face. So I think that data is pretty accurate. Also, as far as like, where our cameras are at. I mean, anymore, like they're on the creek bottoms, like you. I've got them at the lower third, midway, high up. Like they're just literally everywhere because I feel like I'm trying to learn everything I can from running all these cameras. And if I have them all in just a couple different locations or a couple different types of terrain features or elevations, that I don't, I'm not going to learn as much. So really having them spread out. That's why, like I said, this past season, I'm very confident in the data that I have. Like, I don't feel we could have done a lot differently. It's very widespread and, it should be accurate to at least what was happening in our area. And then when I talk to you and I'm seeing similar trends, which, makes a lot of sense. We're kind of seeing a lot of the same movements.
Yeah, no, and that's the same thing that I've tried to do too is like really spread my cameras out, and sometimes it might not even be in places I normally would think, but I call them just
Yep.
kind of like test cameras. Like it'll just be like
Yep.
I don't really know why, but it just looks like it could be good, and I'll just like toss one there and see. And sometimes that
Yep.
doesn't even have anything to do with scrapes. It could be on some trails. It could be on a little. It just doesn't. Sometimes there's not really a really good
Yep.
rhyme or reason other than me trying to test things.
Yep. Nope. I probably out of 170, I probably had 20 like that. And they're like 50-50 deals,
Yeah.
if that. A lot of times they don't pan out, but then even if you say, me, I had 20, but if I even had three or four that really showed me something like going into next season, like that's very, very helpful information that you can use going into next season. And I'm sure just like you, I literally don't check them for sometimes. I had one, I kid you not, that I was late on it. I went a year and a half without ever even checking it. And it was okay. It wasn't what I was really hoping for. But I got some key intel on it, but it's like, it's just, it's really amazing when you wait like a year or 6 months or whatever and then grab all that intel. Like it seems like it's more fulfilling that way than like checking your camera every week. And you don't really see that whole or year long process of when a spot turns on and when it's not good and how often this buck comes through or certain patterns. Like it's really neat to watch it in a long period of time like that.
Yeah, it is. And it can be like leaving cameras out because I do that a lot, but it's like it can be one of two ways. Either a bear's going to rip it off a tree or something happens and you're like, "Man, I wish I would have checked it earlier." Or you just get that data
Yep.
like you're talking about.
Yep.
I have a camera in New York that I put up last December, so in 2021. So I kind of forgot about it, and I haven't been back. And I'm like, I need to get up there and check that camera if it's still there. But I guess we'll see whether that camera is still there when I get back up.
Yep. Nope. I have some like that as well. And I never put a lot of times my best camera. I'll usually put like a cheap Tasco there for those situations. But overall, like those are probably some of my favorite ones. It's like it's really like a kid on Christmas. Like it's kind of like a once a year or once or twice a year check, and it's just always exciting to see what you're gonna get.
Yeah, oh, it really is. And one thing I wanted to note about the data too is so I ran about a half a dozen cameras down in West Virginia this past year, or it was year 4 or 5 or 6. I don't remember. I haven't checked them all yet. But there's some that I did that I did pull when I was down there rut hunting. So and I was like around the 20th. So I had data up until then, and there was actually some similarities in West Virginia to Pennsylvania as far as certain dates, and it kind of blew my mind because down there the rut is typically later, so maybe it was more of a traditional year. Okay. Normally, like it's like from you look like the 15th of Thanksgiving is always like really good down there, but it was just like a lot of the days, even in October, some of the days lined up as far as the 20th being a good movement day and some other things that was just, it was really interesting to see. A lot smaller of a camera study, but it still was interesting to see some of those trends.
Yeah, and they're probably seeing some of the same weather patterns and that as us. And because I'm always posting this information, and it's just amazing, like how many people are like, Steve, I saw the same exact thing, and sometimes it's in another state or at least 200-300 miles away, and it's and then it's all time of year and weather, and with a lot of these movement patterns, and for the most part, like I get more people agreeing with what I'm seeing than people are like, I saw completely opposite of that. So it definitely makes you start to take it more seriously and realize, okay, this isn't all just a fluke. Like if everybody else is mainly seeing what I'm seeing, then I need to be focusing on what I'm learning from gathering all this data.
Yeah. So I guess that transitions to like what do you think? What will that change as far as like your postseason strategy, scouting, and then kind of going into this next year? Does any of this camera data change kind of how you're looking at the woods?
Oh yeah, every year. And I can't always say that every year is the same as the last, but I always kind of start off the next season based on what I saw last year, and I always put it this way. It usually gets you in the ballpark, but then you'll have to make some adjustments as as the season goes on. There's always going to be different things that happen, different food sources, hunting pressure, different factors that are always going to mix things up for you, but it's still always good enough to use, especially when, like you said, you record history with individual bucks and their movements, which way they're going to and from, and that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's all important, but you also can never say that he came through last year November 6th on a cold front and a west or a north wind, and it's never quite that easy, but it always gets your foot in the door for the most part, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's the thing that I think is really important from this past year to learn from is all right, we have another year with similar conditions, not much food, drought type conditions. Browse was turning brown or earlier, the greenery was turning brown, and all of those things. And you start seeing a year like that again, you can make those changes. I attribute me killing my buck this past year to what I saw in 2020, because I was okay, I was hunting some of these tops and some of these higher spots when it was hot, and my camera data showed me that they were on these hemlock side hills and down in the creek bottoms, and during that period, because it was prolonged hot weather, a day of hot weather or whatever is not going to really move them, in my opinion, that much. Where you start getting prolonged, they're going to have to adjust. They need to get water. They need to, there's differences, some shade. And that, made me move into those types of locations. And, eventually it ended up killing a deer. And I look at that just as much as the dates and everything. Try to look at conditions and food and hunting pressure, all that stuff kind of, weighs in on it. And the more years that you do this, like us that have done it our whole lives, you start building this catalog in your mind, and all of a sudden you start seeing something that's weird a different trend that you haven't seen in the last few years, but you're like, oh, I remember in 2015 that we had something similar to this, and this is what I remember from it. And now that, having this data in spreadsheets, man, it's like, or in a notebook, it's just another thing for you to be able to go back on and really be able to learn going forward.
Nope, you hit the nail on the head. Especially if you do it for a long period of time, like 2-3 years of it. I mean, you're going to get some really good information, but there's a lot of different things and different factors that, 5-10 years at least of recording this kind of data and experiencing a lot of different situations, that can happen in the big woods. That's when you're really going to benefit from it. It's never too late to start, but I think the longer you do this, the better it's really going to help you out, in the long run. And it's when you brought up those, I don't mean to beat around the bush, but when you brought up like you shooting your buck in a creek bottom early November, like I totally screwed it up because we were late on that find, and I should have recognized that, because the best activity we had in the earlier part of November was in creek bottoms, and it was hot. So a lot of our creek bottoms, just like you said, they have hemlock, they're shadier, they're going to be cooler. Plus, really, that's about the only place there was a good water source, because all those higher mountain springs in that were all dried up. And you figure, even though they're not rutting real heavy on those warm days, they're still moving more than usual. They're going to be extremely thirsty. I mean, you definitely, hit the nail on the head as far as your setup and being in the right place at the right time. That's a mistake that I made in November. I should have focused more, around those creek bottoms, because that's really about the only place it was happening.
Yeah. I mean, it took me screwing that up myself to like learn that and and come back to it. And with that being said, I hunted in those types of areas for 3 days prior to that, and I didn't see a single deer, and it was hot. So
Sure.
It still takes the time and a stroke of luck to throw that in there. But the spot I moved to that afternoon where I ended up shooting that buck, I wasn't sitting in that exact spot for the previous 3 days, but I went down in there, and it was just like you felt cool. It felt cooler. It was 74 degrees that day, and it felt 10 or 15 degrees cooler down in that spot, and it just felt good. It felt good, and he came running up, and it worked out. But sometimes it doesn't. But it's just like you learn
Absolutely.
from those mistakes every year that you make, and try to be able to rekindle those memories when you're in the heat of it, and you're struggling to find sign and struggling to find deer. I mean, I said it multiple times, like this past year, there was never a season where I felt like I knew nothing about deer as much as this past season, as far as trying to get on them up until that point. It was just it was tough, and yeah, it was just tough.
Yep. And that's where the experience of, especially in big woods, because many times in big woods, you're not seeing anything, but yet you're in the right spot. And you're able to tell yourself, I'm doing everything right. This is just part of this kind of hunting. And that's where the experience factor plays a big part, because 9 out of 10 hunters are going to be like, okay, I haven't seen a deer in 3 days. I'm doing something wrong. You were doing everything right. You didn't have the weather helping you. You were in the right type of area, and that's what all boils down to, is experience in this kind of environment. Because in my opinion, I've talked to hunters all over the country, and I think where we hunt, and not just this specific spot, but this type of hunting is the most challenging. It's the most mind-boggling. I mean, it can beat you up both mentally and physically. So if you're not prepared for that, it's not going to be for you.
Yeah, and it's funny, Steve. It's funny you and I being on this, and from similar types of areas. It's like it's not. People see, some of the pictures that you get and everything. It's like, oh, there must be big deer everywhere. It's like, no, actually, like it's not it's not special at all from that standpoint. It's just like you're running a ridiculous amount of cameras, and it's taking a ridiculous amount of time to do that and find these deer. And that can be applied to other areas just fine. And, and I'm sure you get this too, is like, oh, aren't you worried about like pressure and people coming to the areas that you're in? And it's like, not really, because it's really going to take someone that's serious to want to do it more than a year or two. Because it's a literally, you're putting, I don't want to be over dramatic and saying a lifetime, but it's pretty close to like you need to dedicate a lot of time to figuring it out and working towards it. And I don't think that many people want to do that. Now, I think it's super cool when they do, and those are the type of people I want to hang around. But it's not easy, and there's no way around it. Oh. I know you do it smart, where you say that you don't respond to any messages during hunting season because you're focusing. But like the amount of people that'll reach out and be like, I'm doing these things, I'm going to this sign, and I'm not seeing anything. And what do you think? And I'm like, I think you're doing the right thing. You just got to put in more time. Like it's like, and that's all there is to it. Like it's gonna take time to figure it out. But I don't know. That's just kind of not a rant, but something I notice.
No, that's what I was trying to say. And honestly, like, I mean, I've been very fortunate, lucky, whatever, but as much experience as I have, I never go into any hunting season in Pennsylvania thinking I'm going to kill a buck. I mean, yeah, granted, I would feel pretty confident I could at least kill a legal buck every year, but it is so hard to consistently kill mature deer here that as confident as someone might think I am, I never go into, like, I'm completely humble, not so much to try to just tell myself to be humble, but I've been humbled one too many times in these woods, this environment, that I know how hard it is. And it's always just a huge blessing and extremely rewarding whenever you do have success here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Steve, I want to be respectful to your time. I know you got to get rolling here, but thank you for jumping on and going through this data. I think that was really cool to be able to compare some of this stuff and hopefully, help others that, had a struggle this past season too and can, make sense of a little bit of it. So thank you. And tell everybody where they can find any of your stuff as you're always putting out good information.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. You can just find me on social media anymore. Sherk's Guide Service, either on Instagram or Facebook. I don't have a website anymore. I just couldn't keep up with it and handle it right. But I love, like I said, every time, whether I'm on this podcast or it seems like whenever I do a podcast, I always seem to get new followers and meet all kinds of great people. So definitely, if you're a new person that doesn't know about me, give me a follow and definitely shoot me a message, and I'd be definitely looking forward to getting to know as many great hunters. It's just amazing how many passionate people. It seems like anymore you only have like the real passionate hunters, and that's about it. But it's definitely something that I feel very honored to be a part of, to say the least.
Yeah, awesome. Again, thank you, Steve. Even with the technical difficulties, we knocked it out, and always appreciate it.
All right, take care, bud. We'll see you later.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.